Welcome to AECO Tech Talk, the podcast that explores the intersection of technology, innovation, and the built environment. We'd like to thank our sponsor, AECO Digitech, expert consultation for digital transformation. And now, here is your host, Dr. Johnny Fortune.
Hello, welcome everybody to another episode of AECO Tech Talk. I am so excited to have my friend Michaela Socci here today, who is the CEO of WeMotor. WeMotor helps AEC firms in the U.S. Grow without delays and cost of traditional hiring. And basically, they've many years of staffing services by using what's called an insertion model. So we're going to find out more about that. So Micaela, so glad that you're here. Please introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Of course. Well, hi, Johnny. Thank you for having me here. It's a pleasure. It's so nice to be able to participate on a friend's podcast, and I'm sure that your listeners are going to be pretty interested by this topic. So as Johnny said, yes, Michaela Socci. I'm from Argentina. I'm here drinking mate, of course. We've been in this industry for almost 41 years now, originally from Argentina, and we've been in the US market 3 years. Our insourcing model is making a great difference. Basically, we provide staffing services, not really project-based solutions, and this has made a great change with our clients. We work under partnerships, not really just, transactional models that are not so scalable. And I always say, we want to work smarter, not harder, right?
Yeah, definitely. Well, I think I met you, Micaela, at probably a DBIA conference a few years ago, and I've seen you at some conferences since then. We always have an interesting conversation. I'm fascinated with the different approach that you have. But before we dive into some of the details of what we're talking about today, I always like to ask our guests to just share a fun fact or an interesting experience you had. It just really gives our audience a chance to, better get to know you.
Of course, yes. Well, actually, I'm going to tell a fun fact about us and the exchanges we usually have at conferences.
Yeah.
So last time we saw each other, I don't know if you remember, it was at the RCN conference. And we were at the hallway. I don't know why we ended up talking about F1, Formula One.
Oh, yeah.
I'm actually a big fan, and you were a big fan as well. And we started talking about McLaren and all the changes and, all these new things that are happening now with 2026 and a new company coming into the races, 2 new racers, so a lot of things going on, 2 new drivers, sorry. And I think that we were in a pretty heated conversation because after that, a coworker of mine came to me and she was like, Mika, I wasn't aware that you're such a big fan of Formula One. I was like, how do you know that? Well, because you were basically screaming with Johnny about it and laughing and apparently the entire conference room was hearing us instead of the speaker talk about it.
I did not know that.
Yes.
I have to get farther away from the conference room when I have my F1
next
discussions.
Time, yes.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you know, but next week that Johnny and I will be at the same conference, there's an after event in a Formula One arcade.
Oh yeah, that's going to be a blast. Yeah,
yes.
That's a highlight of what I'm looking forward to at Geo Week. Yeah, so it's going to be a lot of fun. Hopefully we'll see some of our audience there, and they can come up and talk with us about F1. But
definitely,
yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize that our conversation was bleeding over and taking over important conversations.
I didn't realize either.
About reality capture. My apologies to the Reality Capture Network if we disturbed your session. But if I remember correctly, you were pulling for Lando Norris, and he won the championship.
Yes.
So congratulations.
Thank you.
In your fan community.
Not the championship that we expected, but at the end of the day, champion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Okay, well, let's get down to business. We need to talk about what's happening in the industry, the AECO industry. And this is I want to talk about today a challenge that I've actually presented on multiple times as part of different challenges that the industry faces. I know there was a McKinsey report that came out some time back that says, I think by 2031, there was expected a 41% reduction in workforce. There's an expected, by 2030, you mentioned to me previously that there's this whole new generation entering the industry, and approximately 60% of the workforce is going to be Gen Z. So there has to be some modifications and changes to the way that we do work. And then one of the main challenges that I continue to hear is just a workforce shortage. And what I've heard is that it's not just in the trades. People are having that experience in the AEC as well, not just the trades, but they're also having it for, modelers, drafters, intern architects, interior designers. So they're having some real difficulty, but and they need more workforce to help meet the needs. So there's obviously challenges like, getting talent, and then once you get talent, making sure they're appropriately trained and ready to go, and then just the changes in culture, differences through generations, new leadership and how they've done business in the past may not be the way they need to lead their teams in the future. So I know that's kind of a big topic, and that's an area that you're very familiar with. That's what you focus on, right?
Exactly, yeah. What you just said, Johnny, there's a real gap. And I know that the AEC industry, it's always making a great effort to innovate and to be up to date, but it's basically one of the sectors that tends to be a bit behind on trends, on innovations, on talent, and right now that has worsened even a bit more. We have a new generation, Gen Z, coming to work with us, and we're not ready to integrate them into our structures. They work differently, their brains function differently, they have a different culture, and leadership is not ready to integrate them, and at the same time, they're not up to speed, and they're not ready to embrace the type of work they're expected to do. So there's a gap in between that I think it's super important to be conscious on how we're covering it, how we're building new processes, and how we're adapting to reality, to be honest, because there's a lot of theory around how we can close that gap. The reality may be way different than what we're seeing in our BIM environments.
Yeah. And I hear a lot of people say, well, we'll just hire more people. And then, of course, there's a challenge of finding good talent. And then also, well, if maybe they're not ready, but we'll just train them. And I hear people say that quite often, but it is not a quick and easy thing to do, like to bring in completely fresh talent, to find good talent, and then it takes time to get them properly trained and up to speed. And we've seen a growing trend where, over the last 6 to 10 years, where people don't stay on, with companies very long. Like they're only there a couple, 3 years, and then they're moved to another company. And so that's a huge investment in time for companies to bring on new talent, completely train them up, and then like before they know it, it's many of them are moving to another company. And so that's a real challenge for the industry. It's a real challenge for organizations.
Yeah, I want to add a little bit to that. The hiring industry has changed. A couple of days ago, it used to be a firm owner, a leader, a department leader, director, stating the requirements, someone going out and sourcing candidates. If the candidates agree with their requirements, then they were good to go, and they were willing to, start from scratch and learn and learn and learn. That doesn't happen anymore. There's a real negotiation happening And if you have a lot of requirements, then they're going to want benefits. And it's not simply just having someone with the technical skill sets. You need to have a good job offer. You need to have a good culture that they want to participate on. You need to have good benefits. There's even the concept of the emotional salary. How are you really able to ensure to your team members that they're being part of something, that they have a career path, that they have work-life balance, and all those things? I see a bit of a couple of firm owners, leaders, etc., that they haven't seen that yet, and they haven't done that mindset shift. And I think it's time that we do it. We need to embrace the new reality.
Yeah, I think we're far removed from that. Just having a good salary is enough to keep people motivated. I mean, it certainly is a motivation, but it's not the only motivation. I remember talking to a leader at one time that was really in line to take over leadership for a firm. They were kind of be the next generation of leaders, and after multiple discussions with them, one statement that they made was, about people understanding that they're not just coming in and modeling buildings and developing a design, but there was a lot of Department of Defense work that people coming in were basically supporting, the military or the Department of Defense. They're basically supporting America's warfighter. And that type of statement, and I told them then, I'm like, that is what that's one thing that will motivate people, understanding that the purpose of what they're doing is, not just to get through the work week or the work day, and complete tasks, but it's a bigger picture of how you are supporting a greater mission than yourself. So people need that. Yeah. And they need a healthy place, like a non-toxic work environment. And so many of our work environments are toxic. I've been in a few myself, and it can really have an impact on how people are able to contribute. So I was in AE firms for over 20 years, and in those roles, there were times where I was evaluating different options for the firms, in terms of technology, productivity improvements. I've had a little bit of experience, not much, but a little bit of experience like working with outsourcing. And that little bit is kind of limited to pilot. And we did try to pilot. And I think this was maybe a group in India that we were working with. Just as a pilot, we sent them some information just to kind of try it out and see what type of results we would get. I'll tell you, it was an immediate, this will not work for us. It was just too many things that were wrong with our drawings and our models. And we turned those things over to our client, and the quality was just missing. And so it really it turned me off to outsourcing. But you have a different approach. It's not like traditional outsourcing. You refer to it as insourcing. I've heard you say that several times in the insertion model. So can you tell us just a little bit more about the difference there?
Of course, yes. So first of all, I've heard so many horror stories about outsourcing and companies saying yes to everything and not being ready to delegate as they should. And on both ends, there's miscommunication is the number one issue when working with partners, vendors, and that amplifies even more when you're working with someone that's not on your country, that has a different native language. So when we decided to come to the US market, we had a lot of infrastructure, a lot of history and background in the industry, but under a different market. Of course, the Latin American market works completely different than the United States, but we wanted to create a conscious process, and having all that understanding of the industry, we created a system that we have certainty of how it works. And basically, instead of outsourcing, the great difference here is we're not outsiders, we're not vendors. We fully integrate into our clients' workflow system. We have an entire team that works as an external HR department to our clients, for example. So we're constantly creating system and workflows together. We're sending out performance reviews. Our team members work with just one client. So it's not that they're working on multiple projects and multiple clients. They fully integrate to our client system. And it's not delegation, it's integration. So there's a little bit of a mindset shift there. And at the same time, we are the employer of record. That means that you're basically paying for a service, a cost of HR cost, and not really having a new employee in-house. We handle payroll, we handle management, we handle training opportunities. So we handle all that side. And at the same time, we make sure to bring in tools, tips, softwares that allow not only a full integration, but a higher retention, a higher deliverable, and the culture as well. The situation that you just mentioned was with a firm from India. I'm sure there are great companies all around the world in India as well. Yeah. We have our team members based in Latin America. We want to be able to mirror your time zone. So if we're based in Latin America, we can actually do that and work while you're working. I know that the 24/7 system may work sometimes, but in order to expedite communication, being able to work under the same time zone, it's crucial for us. But I would love to hear more about that experience in particular, Johnny. You said it was just a trial period or something?
Yeah, it was a pilot. We were just kind of testing it out to see if it was something that we could a service we would be able to use. But yeah, it was more like just send a whole bunch of files. Email was kind of the communication media. Send a whole bunch of files, including standards and expectations, examples of what it should be like when it gets turned around, and then 2-3 days later, not any communication in between, just 2 or 3 days later, this is what comes back. And I just remember the internal discussions at the time about that was we would spend more time back and forth communicating about what it needed to be than it would for our own staff at the time to be able to complete it. Right. So it wasn't going to be a reduction in cost for us. It was basically outsourcing that would have had a cost associated with it, presumably or planned to be a lower cost to the company. But then when we factored in all the back and forth time, with the outsourcing, trying to get the quality right, yeah, we just realized we would actually be spending more money outsourcing than we would be saving money. So. And then since then, I think there's also, a strange thing that happens to me on LinkedIn. So, I get requests all the time, and I usually I look at it. Is this person really in the industry? I tend to just not make connections for the sake of making connections, but that's just my own personal approach. Because when I've done that in the past and just accepted everything that come in, I get all kind of sales and. So I tend to try to make sure they're in the industry and that there's some mutual connections, their role, et cetera. But it still happens so often that some that I accept a connection request, I immediately get bombarded with all of this stuff that can be outsourced. And candidly, that's not even my role anymore. So it's just, I see it all the time about outsourcing, and it is always presented as so easy, but there are challenges with outsourcing. And you're right, around the globe, there are definitely different companies that have high quality. I've got some friends that have seen some success, in that type of model. But me personally, I've just had some negative experiences, and I've heard many other people also that's had some negative experiences with outsourcing, mainly around the quality. And I guess if you're working on projects where your ultimate goal is to get something printed out. Maybe it's not as noticeable. But mine was more like these files have to be clean. The files themselves have to meet a certain standard before we can turn them over to a client.
Yeah, you ended up with more rework than if you would just done it yourself. Definitely.
Absolutely.
I think that in that sense, the mindset shift also comes with certain values that we follow, and I think that our clients follows as well. We build trust. Again, we're not just vendors, then we're partners, and trust is crucial for us. So all those, cold callings and cold messagings, it makes no sense trying to create a partnership with someone out of the blue, just offering BIM services, BIM modeling.
Right.
And another value that I consider that is pretty aligned to the insourcing model is ownership and accountability. Using this model allows that remote person that you have. Imagine you're one of our clients, you're based in Florida, you're working in a certain project, and you have remote personnel supporting you. They have ownership and they are accountable of the project as if they were in the office sitting next to you. And that is part of our pre-vetting processes and all the structure that we have that end up being what we consider the key factor to get great results. I always say that our specialty is not BIM, it's not even any particular niche, it's human resources. We're experts on building systems and finding talent for the AEC industry, and that's where our WeMotor value is on the cultural fit that we're able to create.
So let me ask you, with this difference between insourcing and outsourcing, what do you feel like are the most common misconceptions that AEC firm owners have about the two?
Well, what you just said, sometimes I see or I hear stories of people that just send out a couple of things over an email, a couple of documents, and hope for the best. And honestly, doing that without a context, without a kickoff meeting, without a true communication process around I think that's a misconception due to the fact that they consider like these providers outsiders. Having them as outsiders make no sense. Consider them part of your team, integrate them into your team, and you'll see the difference.
Yeah. Yeah, and I know you're based in Latin America, Argentina, right? And that you do a lot to vet those that you staff with different firms. What specific values and work ethics, specifically for your staff, that you're placing with AEC firms? What do you look for in that vetting process? I know it's got to be communication, because I heard a lot about that, like the ability to communicate, the ability to, to kind of take on the project as being a part of the team. So that mindset, I know, has to be a huge thing. What are the other things that you look for in your vetting process?
A little bit of what I just said before regarding accountability as well. Communication, accountability, and adaptability. Our WeMoteers, that's how we call our remote professionals, the WeMoteers. They all have previous experience working with US projects, and we don't really work with junior positions. So in that sense, when we're pre-vetting them, we want to make sure that they have a passion for what they're doing, but at the same time, they're willing to adapt to a new company, because they are going to fully integrate to that company. They are going to follow your SOPs. They're going to follow your structure, your standards. You are going to be the one redlining them. So that adaptability to work under a high pressure environment, the AC is to me it's a high pressure industry, and adapt to someone else's system is important. And you can actually see that whenever you are interviewing. My grandma used to say, you can teach new tricks to an old dog. So we're always making sure that we're able to find those people that are curious, that want to learn, that they don't feel that they're owners of the truth. And that's a great value that we look for in our talent.
Very good. So I will curious, could you share like a success story, maybe a brief success story of maybe an owner that was like hesitant to look at this insourcing model, but after some work with them, basically they've come back and now they're a champion for what you're doing?
Of course, yes. Well, the first story that comes to mind, it's a client, they're based out in Pittsburgh, and we met again at a DBIA conference as well, a year before we both met. And we had a nice conversation, and they were actually looking to expand nationally. So they were based locally, and they had a new COO that wanted to expand on a national level. So in my mind, we were the perfect fit to allow them to have that availability to scale. And they were not even interested. So I basically chased them for 14 months, a year and 2 months, basically. And after that, I think they just got tired. So...
Okay, that's too funny.
Yes, and the first trial that we had was with a project. They were remodeling a stadium, and they had no one that had stadium experience. Design, and they had to remodel the design. So they were like, okay, if you're able to find someone that has stadium experience designing and remodeling them, etc., blah blah blah, specific, super specific, and we found a perfect candidate. I even remember her name, Paloma, and Paloma was awesome. Paloma in Spanish means pigeon. So this little pigeon, Paloma, she went through the trial period. She rocked it. She's still today working with them as a full-time member under our insourcing model. And since then, they have hired with us and at least, I want to say, almost 20 team members. And they were able to expand, and every time they need to embark on a new project that they may not have that specific skill set, we're the one providing that new capacity to scale and to add a new industry and to add a new type of project.
Oh, that's very interesting. That is incredibly interesting, because I think that would be very encouraging for owners of firms to hear, like that this is a way to expand the markets that they're working in.
Exactly.
is basically to be able to scale their workforce and venture off into additional markets, which is important to have. I will say that's one thing that I recall about one of the multiple firms that I work with, that they were well positioned in that they did federal work, but they also government work. They also did private sector, so public and private sector. And the nice thing about that is that they generally have complementary market curves. So when the public sector is really busy and a lot of work, a lot of times the private sector is not, and vice versa. So it's great to have that diversity, for firms. And it sounds like this insourcing model is a way to really help supplement that.
Exactly.
So let's talk about tech stacks for a minute. This is one of my favorite topics to talk about these days. But tech stacks have gotten overly complicated. And, I will say, I've worked in standards for many, many years. And there's always been this push for interoperability. Like a lot of the standards are about making things interoperable, one piece of software working with another, and challenges in interoperability has like brought up all these different technology solutions. And many times they fix one little piece of it, but not the whole piece. And so like organizations end up with lots of small pieces that then they're trying to put together like a puzzle, make all these different pieces talk to each other and make them work. So in general, AECO tech stack, way overcomplicated. And so you can tell this is one of my hot button items. But if you're consulting an owner who is just kind of buried in this, like, what is one of the first tech stack shifts that they should make to improve remote coordination in particular? Like, what are some of the pieces? I know you've worked with Bluebeam Studio and some of the other pieces, but what are some of the high value pieces, like that a firm owner really needs to make in terms of their tech stack to be able to support remote work like this?
Well, I would start by saying, don't marry to any tech stack. Don't fall in love with any of those particular softwares. Of course, I agree we shouldn't have like 10, 12 things going on and a CRM and a project tool and Slack and so many things, because it makes more work than it actually solves it. So try to centralize your tools and your communication processes, but don't fall in love with any of them. I don't think nowadays we should be fundamentalists of any particular tech stack. Try to use softwares that are more user-friendly, more simple, that they are not so overcomplicated to set them up, and consider the type of team members and their adaptability to their technology, right? Especially firms where there are a lot of different departments and different profiles working within your firm. Take that into consideration whenever you are building your tech stack. I see in architecture firms generally, I think that engineering, construction, service providers, they are more up to speed with technology. But for example, with architecture firms, there tends to be more of a rejection toward heavy software-based solutions. So bringing something that is simple, user-friendly, and go back to basics, like for example, setting online meetings, and use that as a communication tool. Have weekly meetings, kickoff meetings for the projects. I talked about that a lot, the importance of, for example, every time you're getting started with a project, go over a kickoff meeting, review who is the responsible review. Then you can decide whether you use a project management tool, whether you use Slack or just a simple Excel. But I would say that the first step would be looking backwards, analyzing the team that you have working with you and what would best adapt to them.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I was just thinking about your timeline of expanding into the U.S. and I think you mentioned earlier 3 years, much longer in Latin America, but expanding in the U.S. the last 3 years, and it just reminded me, the pandemic changed so many things. It also changed a lot of opinion about remote work, and it really kind of set the stage for people realizing that remote work can be a very good solution. And I know there's people that would debate whether it's okay, you need to go back to the office or not, and there's benefits and pros and cons of kind of each approach. But I think, before the pandemic, I don't think people would have been as open to supporting remote work, right? From my memory, they didn't seem to be quite as open. Some industries maybe, but architecture and engineering, construction, really not so much. And now it's like people went through that time and saw the value of being able to have those tools and enable that type of work. And many of the organizations are still using remote work, even for their fully fledged employees, full-time employees. They still have options. So it kind of sets the stage for, the things that have happened in our world really has led to this point where people are much more open to it than they had been previously. So let me ask you, how do firm leaders, how do they maintain that high standards of quality and consistency in their drawings when the team is spread, like through WeMotor?
Well, pretty simple. I would say that standards and feedback loop are the key elements here. of course, make use of your tech stack. You should have one. Having an eternal email thread creates confusion. So have a tech stack, and in order to maintain quality and brand consistency, take time to have a good onboarding process. I always end up going back to the HR aspect of all your questions, because I think that at the end of the day, we are humans working with humans. So if you want to maintain quality, you want to make sure that whenever you say quality, you and we both have the same understanding of what it means. Because sometimes you may say, this is a quality project to me, and to me, this other thing seems quality as well. So make sure that we are honestly aligned on the meanings of what we're creating together. Make a good use of your templates. Have a good QA process. I think QA, it's of course a must. And review the rhythm of the workload. And what I mean when I say rhythm is have a system in which the feedback that you're giving is not just, feedback on a meeting and we never talk about it again. How that feedback is going to create a new standard, is going to create an improvement, and how that improvement is going to be translated into the rest of the team and into the rest of the projects, processes, etc. At the end of the day, it all comes to being conscious about it and investing time on the quality that you want your team to have. Firm owners sometimes forget that they need to be the leaders of that quality. And that leaders of the quality is not just saying in a meeting, I don't want to lower our quality. Okay, if you don't want to do it, be the owner, be accountable of that, and make sure that we're all participating on that high quality standard project, a high quality template, etc.
Yeah, so that's very interesting. I'm really starting to see and appreciate the approach you're describing, because it is not about send us 100 files. We're going to convert 100 CAD files into BIM models and then send it back to you. And there's just a very low transaction in terms of relationship, right? It's just, here's data, turn it into something else. Here's the data back, right?
And I just want to add a little bit here. Don't get me wrong. There are a lot of times that you will need that maybe more fast-paced and transactional situation in which you just send out files and you receive an end deliverable and that's it. And that works as well a lot. That's why you have so many people reaching out to you like, hey, we provide BIM models, because there's an entire industry around that. What I'm saying here is that the difference is that if you want to scale and you want to have consistency and maintain quality, the investment regarding time, it's completely different. I'm not saying that outsourcing never works. It works, but not as a long-term scalable solution.
Right. It's the difference between just looking at a production machine.
Exactly.
There's input, there's process, there's output, right? And building at scale, like growing your business and increasing your capacity and maintaining quality or improving quality at the same time. Yeah, very incredibly good perspective. I really appreciate you sharing that. So let's talk about the business of freedom here. So you mentioned that sometimes architects are not necessarily taught the business side of architecture. They're taught to rigorous design thinking. Form, fit, purpose. They're certainly taught a lot of those things. And it's been my experience as well, like that most of the architects that I've worked around, they're very creative, obviously. They're very good. Many of them are very, very good at design. But many of them don't have like business training. Like they end up with kind of their own company and they just don't have any experience or knowledge on how to run the company or how to improve the company. And the one area that I really have seen a lot over the years is with respect to all my architect friends, it's really the HR, right? It's just that they don't have any type of training or expertise in HR related matters. So talk about for a minute how the remote team can help a founder or an owner or somebody who developing their firm. How does it help them pass these barriers of this like unknown domain, of HR for them?
Of course, yes. Well, before jumping directly onto how we could support that, let me say that I'm amazed, especially by those engineering and architecture minds, that they are so creative and they can actually see, a land, and they already have the layout on their mind. I really don't have that ability, and I would love to have that. And how they imagine materials, and I'm amazed on how their brains function. But at the same time, I understand why they struggle a lot with more tangible and hard things like HR, because HR sometimes seems like this software that the HR lady that is supporting you. No, it has a lot of background to it, and it has a lot of intention on what we're doing. So I see why those minds sometimes struggle to be these business owners, and why we sometimes end up being our own bottleneck as firm owners. Mm-hmm. I would say that the first step is being aware of that, realizing that you are the bottleneck, and it's hard. It's a hard truth. But once you realize that, we have our system works again as an external HR department. So what that means is that we have special members supporting those leaders as well that are onboarding remote team members. We have coaches that will allow you to, from a soft perspective, understand better how you can be a better leader to our remote team members. We have account managers that have a lot of system tools, little things like, having a template in Notion for communication, and those little details make a difference. And we support both ends as well. So we support our remote team members to be aware of who they are working with and how to better create a system together, right? And so they're great technicians. They're excellent at what they do, but as business operators, sometimes they need this extra support, these allies to them, and check-ins to be sure that we're building something that makes sense on the long run.
Very good. Well, it's a very interesting conversation, because I have seen that. I've been in meetings with some of the leaders of the firms I've been a part of, and I've heard that the leaders of the firms who were architects like just outright say, I don't have the skill set to deal with this HR issue, right? Or I don't have the knowledge. And you're right. I think the first step, is acknowledging that. And when I started my own business, that's when I really learned how much I didn't know about business. So yeah, there is a lot to it, and I think what you're doing, what WeMotor provides is a great help to scale organizations, basically to support them. And I love the fact that your example you gave turned into really a long-term solution, for that firm to really help support them. And it expanded, from one person to like it worked, and it really helped that firm grow to the point where they needed, more help. And so it's just fantastic. That's a great example. And I appreciate your perspective. I think that the times that I've talked to you, of course, I'm not in the market for that type of solution. So, but I've never. One thing I appreciate you about Micaela is that I never hear you being pushy about it. You're like listening to what people's problems are and helping make suggestions and solutions. So I really appreciate you coming today and joining on the podcast and sharing your perspective. It's really, really insightful, and I think it, is a solution that will help with the challenge that we have of the diminishing workforce, the changing workforce. It is a real challenge facing this industry, and I appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. Just one more thing to add here about WeMotor itself. I don't think that our solution is the magic pill. To be honest, if you're truly scaling, you will need on-site team members as well. So I'm not saying that 100% remote, just one US-based firm owner and the rest outside of the US is the solution. I would never say that.
Yeah.
I'm saying that it's a potential solution, and it is a mix of things that need to happen. And I think that we all need to support each other in this industry to be able to close that gap that we were saying at the beginning. Even what you're doing, Johnny, as a consultant, and how you have this amazing mind that I was just saying that architects are like this creative mind, and you have that mind as well regarding how you see processes evolving and how you see like a tiny project, a tiny problem being the result of actually a bigger thing that was happening way higher on a leadership position example. So on that sense, I think that us having these conversations and collaborating and just working together to support firm owners is what we need to do, and is what we owe to the industry, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly proponent of change management myself. There's never really one little fix, right? There's no such thing as the easy button. There's never one fix for everything. So I think it is what we who care about the industry, want to advance the industry, want to help the industry. It is all the things that all of us are trying to do, like that, but really address some of the main problems of the industry. And again, workforce challenges is, in my mind, it's the top of the list, right? Because everything is about people, right? I mean, there's other challenges, but when you think about it, ultimately it comes down to, people and the relationships and, people being in this industry and doing this work. And so thank you again for your efforts in supplementing, to AEC firms who are wanting to scale and grow and need help. I appreciate what you do.
Thanks.
So, Micaela, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate your perspective. I love this idea of the insertion model and insourcing. I don't know. I think I've heard it before, but I don't think I've heard it near as much as I've heard outsourcing. And I do think this is a very interesting alternative for firms that need to move beyond the transactional input, process, output of just converting files and such. So thank you again. Looking forward to seeing you soon. I know we'll see each other at some conferences coming up. We'll definitely talk some F1 again, especially with all the changes this year. That'll be an exciting discussion. Hopefully we will try to do it far enough away from one of the training classes, so we don't bleed over into the other content. Yeah,
definitely. Thanks to you, Johnny. See you in a couple of days. Hope that we keep having these interesting conversations, because I really enjoy hearing your perspective for the industry as well.
Yeah, likewise. See you soon. Thanks so much, Micaela.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to AECO Tech Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcast. We'd once again like to thank our sponsor, AECO Digitech, expert consultation for digital transformation. For more content, including video versions of our interviews and other exclusive material, check out our YouTube channel. Just search for AECO Tech Talk.